I was being interviewed on the Man Talks podcast the other day, and the concept of grief came up, and it really made me realize that it's something that I should probably talk about. Connor and Roger, the host of the podcast, were talking about the fact that their tribe often asks them about grieving and what that looks like, and we got into a little bit of a conversation about it. And I realized it's a really important thing that I have talked about, but I've never really kind of pulled back the curtain on what my own grieving process was like. And I think maybe sharing that could be a very important thing. Maybe especially for men, right? To realize that don't do what I did. It's not something to be scared of. It's not something to run from. And it's a natural part of the healing process that really helps you move forward stronger and more informed than you were before. So for most people know my story, but for those that don't, who may be meeting me for the first time, I want to walk through a little bit of what happened. So my first wife committed suicide after a 6-year battle with bipolar disorder. And during that time, it was very, very challenging. I mean, it was 6 years of basically watching her slowly self-destruct until ultimately, in her mind, suicide was the best way to alleviate the pain and also to set us free. So during that time, there was a lot of different milestones, I guess, where I probably did grieve to a certain extent, but really there were just moments of profound sadness, and then they were just opportunities for me to try to suck it up and move on, or drink the emotions away, rather than really dealing with them, because I didn't feel like I had time. And I thought that grief was weakness. I thought grief meant crying on the couch while the strong people took care of the business that needed to be taken care of. So one of those milestones in my life was realizing, probably after maybe a year or so of Cindy being sick, that things were never going to be normal again. I always held out this hope that once we get the medication right and whatever, then things will be normal. And I realized that it's never going to happen here. So my life, that entire plan I had laid out for my life, was gone. And that was a really hard thing to try to come to terms with. I think the next milestone probably was realizing that our marriage, as it continued to deteriorate and our lives overall deteriorated, and our marriage was a victim of that illness and everything, all the sort of peripheral stuff around that illness, like the ways I coped with it and the things that I did and the things that she did. And realizing that our marriage was over was another milestone of profound sadness. Looking at my 4 and 5-year-old daughter, realizing that how am I going to tell them that their mommy and daddy are no longer going to live in the same house? I would go and crawl into their bed and cry when they were sleeping. And so that was another milestone that was very significant for me. And again, I really just drank it away. I didn't have time to grieve. Obviously, another significant milestone was Cindy's death. And I didn't look at that as it was very tragic and it was very sad, obviously. But to me, it was closing a chapter on one part of my life and moving on to another. And I wanted to I was so done with it. I didn't want to be sad about it anymore. I didn't want any more chaos. I just wanted to close that chapter, be done, forget the pain, all the pain and the tragedy and the misery and the sadness, and just move on and build the life that I always wanted. I wanted to get this exact same version of normal that I was building before she got sick. I wanted to get that back, which was impossible, right? So I continued to drink, right? And so I don't want to get all into that right now, but I think one of the reasons, I guess I'm talking about it because one of the reasons is I think in my heart I was afraid to grieve, and so I just pretended that I had moved on. Now, for me, after her death, what happened was, the way it sort of affected my psyche was, first it was as my relationship with Tanya blossomed and we moved in together, and we, the kids started calling her mommy and all of these wonderful things. I would have these dreams, these incredibly vivid dreams that would wake me up in the middle of the night. And the dreams were where Cindy came back to life, and she came and screwed up our entire situation that we had going on here. So it was almost like she was haunting me from beyond the grave. And then I would have feelings of guilt about it, because it was just such a crappy thing to think. In my dream, I feel like I should be so happy she was back alive. But at the same time, I was so angry and upset that she had come into our lives and fucked it all up, basically. And then I would feel guilty about feeling that way. This was all happening in my dreams. But I mean, your dreams are some kind of projection of yourself, of your subconscious. So that was one of the ways that it sort of manifested itself for me, and I really hated it. I really hated having to go through that, and I had a lot of those dreams, and they were very, very vivid. But once I stopped drinking, then what happened to me was, so actually let me back up. I would have moments where I was sad, where I would cry. I would, but not. I don't know. They were pretty few and far between, I think. And I think what I told myself was the less frequently these things happen, the more I've healed, say, even though I was continuing to drink every day. So when I stopped drinking, that's when the really interesting thing happened to me. And it was probably about 8 or 9 months, maybe, after I stopped drinking. And I had started writing a gratitude journal, writing about things that interested me. And I started feeling like I needed to write about Cindy. And so I did. And it was funny, because it wasn't like to write about our experiences as me as the victim here. It was sort of to write about what happened, but in a way I wanted to honor her memory. And that was a very different feeling for me. And when I wrote about it, it felt good, and it felt like I was making something positive come out of something so tragic. And so I started writing about it more. And I really went through a period there where I was writing about it a lot. And I remember, and it felt good. And there was times where I'd be weeping at my computer screen while I was writing this stuff and dredging these memories back up. And I remember saying to Tanya, do you find it odd that I am, spending so much time writing about Cindy? And she said, no, this is something that you have to go through. And I don't think I had identified it as grief quite yet, but it was something different, I guess. And I found when I was writing this stuff, it was helping me reframe what had happened in my life. And the pain started to diminish as I processed it and accepted it and looked for the actual contribution that it could make to me and to the world. As I told people about it, I started to reframe the feelings of pain into feelings of positivity, I guess. And so as I went through that, I felt there was one day, for example, in June of 2015, where she's buried about an hour from here in Chatham, Ontario, and the kids were gone somewhere for a long weekend, and I wanted to ride my bike to visit her grave. I don't know, I just felt like I compelled to do this, and it was the longest I'd ever ridden my bike. It was about 110 kilometers each way, so it was 220 kilometers total for the day, and I rode my bike there. It was very painful. It was a hot day. It was in the summer, and when I got there, I stood by her grave and I read a poem that a friend of mine had given me, and it was just, I bawled like the hardest I have ever cried since her death. And then I rode my bike home. I was there for like 15 minutes probably. And I think that why I wanted to do that was, she lived her entire life feeling like she was worthless, at her core feeling like she was worthless. And I wanted to ride my bike there, I think, because I wanted to suffer. I wanted her in some way to see that she was worth putting myself through, physically putting myself through what I would put myself through to be there with her. And I mean, in some ways that sounds strange to say it out loud, but it's what felt right to me at the time, and I'm really, really glad I did it. And I know now that also was part of the grieving process. And I know that as I've started to talk more about what happened, and I realize that I'm being of service to people, that's part of the grieving process. And it's really, there's moments now where, like, we watched Forrest Gump with the kids, and this summer, and Jenny dies. Every movie somebody's mother dies, by the way, in case you've never noticed that. But I was just bawling. It affected me so much at the end of the movie because all these memories came flooding back, and I think I just was transported back in time to that moment when I had to sit the kids down and tell them that Cindy was dead. And that's part of the grieving process too, and so I guess what I'm saying is, I don't know when it ends, if there is an end, or if there's even any point in even thinking about it like that. I really don't know. I just know that what has happened to me as a result of giving myself the time and space to be in those feelings and accept that grief is there's nothing to run from. It's a natural part of the healing process. It's done a few things for me. The first is, again, it's allowed me to look back on what happened, not from the perspective of wallowing in all the pain and all those years, but to look at Cindy and the amazing contribution that our relationship made to me. She really played a huge part in contributing to the kind of man that I am, and I'm always going to be grateful for that. We kind of grew up together, right? And the same thing with the girls. I mean, she gave me those girls, and that's a gift that will live on forever. And so I look at those times in the past differently, and it's also allowed me to understand how important it is to let yourself be in the emotional space that you happen to be in, right? Like our emotions are nothing to run from. In fact, being in that space gives us an opportunity to learn a whole bunch of lessons from a completely different perspective than we would typically learn. So that's very, very powerful, and it's really allowed me to learn more about myself, and it's allowed me to teach the kids about grief. That's another benefit that's come from it, is that we're all going to be faced with tragedy at some point in our lives. And I've talked to them at length about what I'm going through and what it's been like and what I've learned from it, and all of those lessons I've been talking to you about today. So when they are faced with it, there's going to be a couple of benefits, right? They're going to understand more about what they're feeling. Their journey through grief, it will be unique, but they'll understand it more, and they'll also understand that I've been through it, and that I want to be there for them, and that I have some valuable insight to offer, and they'll be more likely to come to me. Unless they're grieving my death, then I won't be there. But so there's a really big benefit there, and I think that the last part is really sharing this experience with everybody is a contribution, right? So it's making lemonade out of lemons, I guess, and but I really want to send a strong message, especially the men out there, is that we are stronger when we allow ourselves to feel all of our emotions. Much, much stronger. There are so many insightful lessons to be learned in all of them. And don't shortchange yourself because you have some misguided notion of what it means to be strong or what it means to be a man. Okay? I'm stronger, more courageous, and wiser than I have ever been in my life. And a big part of that reason is because I finally accepted that I feel every human emotion. So, I guess that's really what I wanted to say. And again, I don't know that there's an end point to grieving. I don't know. I don't know if it takes. I just dreamt about Cindy. I think I'm talking about this actually because I had this incredibly vivid dream about reliving Cindy's funeral last night. And I don't know why. It doesn't really matter. I guess that was for whatever reason I needed to go through that. But it was very vivid and it was very sad. And yeah, so those things continue to happen. But I don't measure it now. I don't say, well, if there should be more and more time that elapses between each moment that I feel sad. That's not how it is. It's not linear. It's messy. It goes up and down. Sometimes it hits you when you least expect it, but just be open. Be open with your partner if you have one, or be open with the people closest to you, and let them help you. And understand that by letting yourself feel those emotions, ultimately you're helping yourselves and you're helping everybody that you care about and that cares about you. And that is my 14-minute talk about what grief has been like for me. So I hope this has been helpful for you. And if you ever want to talk about this, reach out to me at jason@thebookofopen.com. I'm always available. Okay, so I hope you have a great day.